Well, hello everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you're joining us from around the world. My name's David McCarthy. I'm the Marine Development Director at AD Associates. We're a London-based experiential and spatial design agency based next to the iconic St Paul's Cathedral. And it's my absolute pleasure to be able to moderate this panel today on the future of the refurbishment market. Giving us an impression, or rather giving you an impression, that this is truly a global panel. We have representatives today all the way from Sydney, from Miami, and also down here in the UK towards the south coast. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Nicholas. He's from Carnival Australia, serving the P&O Cruises brand there. He's the Director of Hotel Assets and Projects. We also have Boris. He's joining us from Miami, and he's the Senior Director of Vessel Refurbishment for NCLH, which is the NCL brand, Oceania, and also Regent Seven Seas. And a very familiar face to, I'm sure, many of you. We're joined also by Mike Oliver, who's the Chairman of True. Gents, thank you very much for joining us today. It's an absolute pleasure to be joining the panel with you.
Good morning.
Thank you, Dave.
Hi, well done. Thank you.
So we're all too aware about what obviously the COVID pandemic has done to the global hospitality and cruise sector. We can't ignore that fact. But one thing that I know my fellow panelists will undoubtedly agree with is that the resilience, the ingenuity, and the absolute passion of the people within this sector and throughout it will ensure that it comes back stronger than ever. We've seen new build ships enter service briefly at the beginning of this year. We know that new ships are continuing to be built. And so, yes, we've also seen some consolidation of existing brands with ships being retired perhaps or sold off. But the continued and possibly the renewed focus on existing tonnage, on existing ships, will ultimately be necessary. So we're going to kick off our first question then with that of dry dock availability. And Nicholas, get us going on this question. We know vessels are always requiring that statutory, dry docking period, of course. But what do you think will be the challenges as we move forward?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Well, typically we plan our dry docks long in advance, before itineraries are planned and brochures are printed. The dry dock dates are sort of signed and sealed. However, with this pandemic and we've had to obviously rethink the dates and replan the dates. And as of today, we still, it's still a moving target. We still need to firm up dates, firm up availability, and so it's a bit of a challenge going forward, trying to find suitable dates that works with coming back into service. We're fortunate that most of our dockings are in Singapore, so we're able to long in advance negotiate and agree dates. But it's still a challenge, with having to rethink the dates and still keeping the compliance of the statutory cycles.
Boris, obviously you have a great responsibility for multiple brands within the NCLH group. What do you think will be a particular challenge moving forward?
Hi, good morning again. Thank you, David. Well, I think exactly what Nick said. It's at the moment the things are significantly different. The ships are still docking because they have to dock for the reason of the certificates, compliance, and the class. However, those dockings are generally at the moment shorter. They don't include big projects. They obviously do still include technical projects from maintenance part, but not necessarily guest facing and hotel large projects. As soon as the situation improves, and it will improve, I think the challenge is going to be to actually everybody will try to dock again at the same time. You might see some rush on the market. As soon as the capital becomes available again, the projects is going to kick in, because as soon as the ships start sailing, they will need their maintenance and they will need the dry docks for the projects. So I would guess that we will see maybe some new emerging yards around the world. There are some already that are showing up. We've seen some in Europe. We've seen some in Caribbeans. We've seen some large corporations opening the yard, offering the product. Curacao, Rotterdam, Belfast, those are all the yards that are now showing up. And I think there will be, when the rush starts, we're all going to be looking for a decent slot in the yard that can provide all the services we need. I think that's going to be the challenge once the things get better and we come back.
Can I ask, will all these ships need to go into dry dock before going into service, or will some be tied up, having like a wet berth and work done that way?
Question to me?
Yeah.
When we come back into service after the pause, Mike, is that your question?
Well, yes, after the pause, just before going back into service. Yeah. Do you see work being done then?
No. No, the ships don't necessarily need to dock. I mean, this is the opportunity. If the ships are laid up, we have the opportunity of doing certain things that we wouldn't be when the ships are in service. But there is no regulation on. There is nothing that mandates the ship to go to dry the wet dock before it got back to service. Unless the timing is there that it's exactly the slot of the period when it has to for the renewal of the certificate.
Right.
So
I think
sorry, go ahead, Nicholas.
Further add to the besides the availability of the yard and that, I think there would also be some challenges around moving technicians to the yard to perform the works. I think there'll be travel is going to be pretty difficult going forward. So there's also the that sort of challenge, the logistics around moving people to the yards and getting them in and out. I think that will be another challenge that we need to consider as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You took the question from me, and moving across to Mike. I mean, you've obviously had to manage some very complex projects in the past. Logistics absolutely key. Having the materials, the manpower, obviously in the right place, in the right time. How do you see, to Nick's point, you managing that as a business?
It's going to be tricky, that's for sure, with the travel, as you say. But again, I think the success of any refit comes back to the planning. And the more planning time we get, then the more we can alleviate the problems before they happen. And I always think there's a strong team with the owner, designer, and contractor. And I think together, we've all been around the block a few times and can see a lot of these problems coming. And yeah, sort of try and nip them in the bud before they become problems.
Absolutely, that's a really good point. And we're actually going to circle back around on some of the specifics that you just mentioned there about the forming of a team and what some of that magic formula might be a little later on. But thanks for your contributions to that first question. I think moving on to our second one, we acknowledge that, and we've seen brands repurpose vessels either wholesale, either by renaming the ship and doing very extensive dry dockings, or introducing signature venues on board so that there's some consistency across their fleet. Of course, we've seen vessels also go to emerging or established brands elsewhere within the marketplace. As well as vessels that are perhaps repositioned, geographically, as some brands were looking to penetrate into new parts of the world. So, giving that some thought, what do we think, are the key considerations when, a vessel, is going to be repurposed or rebranded in some way, and with the added question of that geographical location, what would be some of the challenges? Maybe Boris, you want to take this one up?
Yeah, I think we're generally looking at two things. You're looking at the companies that have enough brands within the groups that allow for sort of repurposing within the group, within maybe different brand, but within the group. So you sort of recycle the existing tonnage. And it works, and we've seen everybody's done that, not just the big companies and the big groups. A lot of vessels have changed the names and have changed the owners. If you want, 3 or 4 times, you'll still recognize some of the ships sailing around because of the funnel or because the way they look, but they've been changing, the brand 3 or 4 times. And I think in the time of the peak and in the good times also, there was always a risk that if too many of the old ships or the old tonnage are put for sale or they are available, there is always a risk or the opportunity of some investors coming together, get 3 or 4 ships and create a cruise line, another competitor, right? So I think on one side, this is sort of very useful recycling that usually ends up or starts with a large refurbishment, rebranding, renaming, changing the looks, and doing everything for the market that it's is gonna go to. The second thing is that we are all looking for new markets, you know, where we can deploy the ships. The beauty of the ships is that it is a movable asset. It's not fixed. It's not in one place. So we do our itinerary planning years ahead. Obviously, the sales and everything is involved. So in our case, on the brands like Regent and Oceania, there is a lot of around the world cruises and 180 days or a month. So those are long cruises that involve huge logistics and organization and coordination efforts in the ports that are maybe not your usual typical ports that are fully equipped. And so in those cases, as we're all looking for the new markets, the question is, it's strategy. How do you approach the new market? Do you know, it's touch and go, which a lot of times has happened, or you actually plan strategically effort to go to a certain market and stay there, right? There is always somebody who has to be first and go through the, you know, learning period and what does it take to operate in certain country or certain part of the world, and then eventually once the path is set, then you'll see that is happening more and more. We've seen that in India, we've seen it over the few years in China, you know, we've seen it maybe 10, 15 years ago in Australia. We've seen that a certain sort of hubs in the world have become also cruise centers, just because a lot of brands have eventually or developed within the region, or the big cruise lines have deployed the assets over there.
That's probably a lovely segue to introduce Nicholas. So obviously, with regards to the vessels that you operate or expecting to operate in the future, of course, as well.
Yeah, I think rebranding and repurposing is sort of right up our street. I mean, that's what we do quite often. But yeah, exactly. It's just how far do you take it? You know, whether it's for a new market or a new geography or a new concept. You know, how far does one take it? You know, I think if it's to move to a new geographic position, I think there is an element of risk that, you know, you may have to pull out of that region again, and so you know, the rebranding would have to be transferable. In other words, you know, could you take it and use it you know, elsewhere? So I think that's where the secret would lie, is just how far does one take it, whether it's for a new geographic market, or if it's just a new concept. You know, the concept may not work and you may need to rethink it. There's always that. So if the design team and the customer has a clear idea and it's transferable, I think there's a lot of value there that you know, especially with when we're going to get to talking about budgets and that going forward. At the same time, yeah, absolutely, getting the right key players as part of that team to understand exactly what is it they want to deliver, and then someone who sees that vision and is able to then deliver on that vision. I think that's critical as well to the whole concept here.
And I think these days our crew as well, I'm sorry, David, our crew, you know, they are, all of them, they speak 5-6 languages. It's very much international, you know, so you have this software possibility to sort of move the right crew to the vessels and prepare the ship to better understand you know, what that market is, and do the sort of work groups within, and eventually you want to make the guests feel like they're humming to something familiar, right? And the product is familiar, so to an extent, right? Of course.
Yeah, and I think the challenge would also be to ensure that you do enough for it to be a rebrand, or to, you know, you don't want, especially for those repeat customers, if it is for you know, an ongoing market, that when they do come on board, that they're seeing that there is a change. You know, you can do something, and how far does one take it to make enough of an impact? That's also, you know, another sort of consideration as well.
Yeah, and I think Mike, bringing you in here, I'm sure you, in your experience as well, you've seen where there has been these refreshes or these rebranding perhaps of or repurposing of vessels, and to Nicholas's point, there's that risk that how far do you go on two fronts? So is it that you through the life span of a ship you perhaps are over capitalizing, its worth, or equally, do you go far enough in that there's almost that black and white between spaces? So you suddenly move from one space, you can see that that's been clearly refurbished, and then you move into another. And to Nicholas's point, that in terms of guest expectation is going to be a huge risk. So, have you had some experience with that? Have you seen those sort of things, occur?
We've had a lot of experience doing rebrands, and everyone's very different. And it depends sometimes where, if a ship's coming from another group, then obviously into another market, then there's more work to be done. But it's really important to make sure, I think, for passengers that they can't see any differences. And you can actually get a lot of bang for your buck by doing a lot of cosmetic work. So there would be decoration and carpets and upholstery and that sort of thing. But there are always major areas that a brand particularly likes. It might be a themed restaurant or bar, and they want to have that on all of their fleet. So that becomes a challenge, and that's where more money is spent. But to pick up on that point, it's very important that the passengers are going around the whole ship and don't feel there's any substandard areas as such, and that's tricky with the budget.
Sure.
Yeah, you would also have various stakeholders in any project that have different priorities. You'd have the owner who has thinking of the return on investment and how much money we can spend. You've got the operator or the guest experience team thinking about the guest and what can they deliver as far as the offerings. You have the interior designer who's thinking about the look and feel. You have the ship managers about the repair and maintenance, and everyone has their interests and their priorities, and it needs a good leader to try and weigh it all up and balance it all up and deliver on what will make the biggest impact across all of those stakeholders. So therefore, a good sponsor, a good decision maker, and a good project manager is critical to that process.
No, absolutely. Coming back
to the brand as well, right? Because some brands, there are brands out there that every vessel is more or less, as Mike was saying, very much the same. They have the same features. The repeated guests or the customers, they are used to that. They want to know the name of the spaces. They want to know and they look the same. And then you have other brands where they are completely away from that, where every ship is absolutely different. Even if maybe not the theme wise, the service wise or the product wise is similar, it's still I don't know, Lido Deck restaurant, it's still the main restaurant, it's still the pub, it's still, but they are all completely different with intention not to have some kind of brand consistency, right, or branding. So that is itself, if eventually changes the owner or the vessel like that moves, present challenges or benefits. It depends which way you want to go, right? In some cases, if you take a ship that is completely different and you bring it into your brand, which is very much uniform, that means that you have to redo the entire ship, right, and refurbish everything, right? So.
Another really interesting point, David, is the fact the services, the bits that the passengers don't see, but we all know, as these guys know as owners, the important bits are the services, so pipe work, electrics, all that side of it. So bang for your buck, you're not getting a lot from a passenger's point of view, but from a ship owner, they don't want flooded public rooms and cabins, and so all that side of it has to be up together. And of course, rebranding, some of these ships can be sort of 20, 30 years old, depending where they're going. And even to the point I've seen once a steelwork where a whole deck had to be replaced because they tested the steelwork and it wasn't right. So the whole deck had to be replaced. So the money that can eat must be scary for an owner.
Yeah, and it's important to have that stakeholder as part of that team. The ship managers, the superintendents of the ships that can bring that to the attention of everyone else, because you tend to get caught up sometimes in those new concepts and new ideas, and you forget about the those technical spaces that do need attendance, pipe work and ducting and AC and yeah, lighting's a big issue as well, electrical. So yeah, it's a big challenge for older ships here.
Indeed, and I think something that you've all touched on, and me, from my perspective, also as an ex seagoer, is that importance of providing the ship staff with the environment and the facilities and the operation to perform their best as well. And to Mike's point, what that means in terms of some of the infrastructure and the upkeep and the dilapidation back of house, as much as it is, front of house, is so critical in terms of delivering, service excellence. So I think, it's easy to see that all these things are very much joined up. And to Nicholas's point, all of those different stakeholders that have a key interest in each of their respective areas. Okay, I think we'll move on to a question around technology. We all have technology advances, certainly, within cruise and hospitality as continued apace, as you'd imagine, whether it be, on board within theatres like LED walls, or whether it be personal devices and the connectivity through apps and other things, of course. But when you have to consider, older tonnage, very different infrastructure, perhaps, and conditions, to a new build, and also the opportunities to introduce new technology. Where do you see and what would you support in terms of some of those technological advances moving forward, perhaps within lighting, perhaps, Nicholas?
Yeah, I think lighting is an area that we tend to really sometimes, if not forget about, but neglect when it comes to a venue, and it's a big part of the interior space. It's trying to understand. I think the critical thing is understanding what is it you have to work with initially. Where's the starting point, and then work forward from there. I still think it's an area that we're still struggling, trying to tie in the new with the old. We're trying to engage consultants. We're trying to get people on board to help. And it's also budget driven. Going into a space, you can blow a substantial part of your budget trying to redo the entire lighting with new dimmer panels and replacement of all, circuits, etc. So if we could find, easier solutions to retrofit older ships with the newer lighting, that would be great. But it's an area that we're still investigating. We're still talking to people, and if anyone out there has any good ideas, yeah, we're open to talk.
$1 million question.
Some byproducts in terms of energy saving and other things which come as a natural part of investigating those those things.
From energy saving?
Yeah, when you're looking at new technologies, do you see those other things, as much as it might be about using lighting very creatively and cleverly within a space, that you might get some added benefit, whether that be through sustainability or through energy saving, etc. Are you seeing some of those things come through?
Oh, absolutely. No, there's an ongoing process with all our ships to try and change over to LED and everything else. So no, that's an ongoing energy saving initiatives, definitely. But often enough, you can go into a venue and do these changes, but you're not getting the moods that you want. So it's important. We in the interior space are looking for the different moods. As I said before, 3 settings really. A daytime setting, a nighttime setting, and a cleaning setting. Just 3 settings in a venue. That's, if we can get that to work, that's great. But yeah, without, you can go and do the energy saving exercise and still not accomplish that. So if we could get, I think it'll go hand in hand if it happens. But yeah, I think that's easy. The energy saving part of it is fairly easy. It's just trying to get the settings and the moods right. I think that's where the challenge is.
Boris, from the brands that you represent, what's your your take in how you maintain or introduce new technology into older ships?
Well, I would agree with Nicholas. I think the first effort, and the one that the industry has taken very, very seriously, was the lighting, and slowly transferring to LED technology as much as we can through the smaller project even with the ships in service, and then to a bigger retrofits when the ships are out in the dry dock. LED to somebody, I'm not an electrician and I don't have a background, so to me it was always a can of worms, and it's always, you never know, there's always some kind of surprise comes with it. Either the dimmers don't work, the circuits are not compatible, the lights doesn't work with this. So we have sort of, to mitigate that, what we've done is we've brought in our group our new build lighting consultants who are always there sort of following our products, what is the sort of the best that we have that comes on a new build. So they come in now in our refurbishment as a part of the project team with sort of knowledge what it should be, you know, and how it should look. And also at the same time they are lighting consultants, so they have knowledge of how the things technically operate, right? So, and I must say that was fairly successful. So to an extent that we will send you know, certain lights to the ships and test them when the ships are maneuvering or the ships are at full speed or the cruising speed, and we have managed to sort of develop a little lab together with them, and it worked. Not the problem, the challenge is that most of the time it is complete replacement. It's very difficult to just, you know, change the halogen light and put an LED and think that it's going to dim and work. It usually doesn't work, right? So it requires budget, but it is on a long term, gives you a flexibility, a little bit more flexibility as an operator. As Nicholas said, the famous 3 settings, day, night, and the USPH one, which is the one that everything goes bright so we can clean, right? And that setup when the architects are there in the new builds, and then maybe, I don't know, down the line when we refurbish and the architects are there, in the meantime, when it's left to the ship, many times things get tweaked, changed, you know, so the settings and the feels that the lights should bring to the whole space sometimes are secondary to actually, no, we need our lux, we need to clean, so put it on or put it off, right? So I think there is still a way to go, and the lighting designer eventually, and not just the one that's gonna, you know, put the light above the table and put it here and put it there and put it like that, which is our operational needs, is the light, as music, as anything else, does bring a lot of feel to a venue, and that's something that we are still, you know, not just with the changing of technology, but with the end product, what we wanna we wanna achieve, right? It's still ways to go.
One thing that struck me in recent times, and that perhaps given a nod to that repurposing of spaces, is how also the entertainment and media, particularly the lighting elements of entertainment, you know, and house lighting, there's a more of a blurred line perhaps forming, you know, again, getting more out of a space or getting more out of the use of different types of lighting. And I think that's something that also moving forward, how those different lighting groups, if you will, and how they perform in a space perhaps might become, you know, more of one, you know, going forward.
Yeah. You know, that's a challenge also in the new builds is when we used to plan things, you're planning 5, 6, 7, 8 years ahead, right? Because your ship's gonna come there and you're putting the specifications. The technology is changing so quickly that for the certain things like not for the LES, for the local entertainment, the things change so quickly that by the time the ship comes there and the time the delivery, your technology is already, you know, as you spec it, is already old. And we can see now in a refurb, we go on board and the speakers are this size and the you know, the lights are this size, and suddenly in the coves, you know, you're sealing coves and they are huge. And then the guys from the local entertainment, our colleagues, they come and they place everything in, and everything is now this big and everything is small, and these coves are still huge. So, you know, you end up filling the gaps, and what we're going to do with it is just because, like you said, and a lot of them are also multi-purpose. They do one and the other, right? They're not just necessarily entertainment lights like they used to be. Absolutely.
It's our job to stay up to speed with all of this, and we obviously use good contractors around us, specialists, and we're always talking to them and meeting them at the exhibitions, like CSI, of course. So that's why those exhibitions are important for us to keep staying in touch with the marketplace and who's out there. But glove in hand with that, of course, is sustainability. So it's important that we're up to date with all the materials, that are more sustainable, and again with lighting and everything else. So reducing power and just the whole subject is a big subject, but you've got to keep striving forward with it.
Yeah. Can I also add, I mean, not only learning from the new builds and what else is happening, I think we can learn a lot from what's happening land-based as well. I think there are some similarities to what we do, especially in the interior space, and that, yes, you know, marine is slightly different when it comes to electrical maybe, but I think there's a lot to be said to be, you know, we can learn a lot from what's happening out in land-based, not only in products, but also processes, etc., technology, project management.
I think the water saving, I think we've all done that, you know, the faucets that are, you know, that are using less water with the aerators, the showers. The water production on the ship is not cheap. Obviously, we bunker or we produce on board. In one or the other case, it costs us money, right?
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of efforts. I know we've done through all the brands and tried to replace, and the water consumption has gone tons and tons. It's been reduced comparing to what it used to be before, right?
Mm.
The cards in the cabins, you know, we all more or less putting them now. So basically, when you leave, the cabin becomes, which was land-based product, right, brought to the ships, becomes idle.
Yeah,
the
good
consumption
point.
goes down.
Yeah.
Half a degree of AC makes a huge difference through the ship, right? And you don't know. I mean, for the guest comfort, is not noticeable, right? But on the saving part, on the energy saving part, is huge. Optimizing hulls, everything what we do, eventually to reduce the consumption, right? So
every little bit counts.
Before we get off this point, and given that nod to land, you know, comparisons, etc., and Mike, asking you, in terms of construction and manufacture and you know, some new technologies there, perhaps that is making life easier when it comes to outfitting, integration of different services. You know, what are you seeing perhaps that in terms of the actual built environment and being prepared for that really narrow window when you have to perform, you know, in a refurbishment, in terms of construction?
I think what's really changed over the years are the specifications and working together. I mean, back in the day, the contractor was the contractor and sort of kept away from the scene until last minute. But I think it's moved forward now where the specifications are much tighter. We're invited to have questions and point out things, which then gets put out to all the other contractors. So there's much more collaboration than there ever was, and that does make life a whole lot easier. Technology, I mean, surveying a ship, we only get sometimes 2 hours. We might fly 2 days to get, for instance, Sydney, and then you've got 2 hours on the ship to run around and see a large specification. So the use of iPads now and all that sort of technology is making life a lot easier and quicker, and the transfer of plans and drawings to each other, the obvious Zoom meetings and all the rest of it, making it a lot easier. But the better the specification, I always say, than the tighter the price and less surprises, which nobody wants surprises, certainly from our side and certainly from an owner's side when they're in charge of these huge budgets. And we all know what it's like when you go over a budget and you've got to go up the chain to get that little bit more, which makes life uncomfortable, I'm sure. So, you know, nobody wants surprises, and from either side of the fence.
You wonderfully, I think you've segued onto our final question, and we've heard about budget, obviously, and the stresses on budget, even at the best of times, and certainly moving forward, getting every bang for your buck, every penny, every cent out of the investment that people are going to be making on board vessels. It strikes me that is there a magic formula? We've touched on in numerous responses already about some of the key players, the key stakeholders that you must have involved, some of the things that you must get right to ensure that process adds as much value as it can. But let's start off with Nicholas. What do you think is your magic formula to ensuring that you're on budget, and you've got that end product exactly what you want? Start us off.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think before we talk about the deliverables, I think it's critical identifying the key people, and for me is the customer, obviously the decision maker. A customer that knows what he wants. That's critical to the process. And then someone who's able to deliver that vision in a way of a design. Then the stakeholders around that that project, a good project manager, if you can have an MEP consultant, someone that can help you through all the technical specs and the mechanical, electrical, etc. That would be great, and a good quantity surveyor, estimator. I think that team is fundamental to delivering a good specification pack. And then the deliverables obviously thereafter would be drawings, photographs, specifications, and the more detail one gives, as Mike said earlier, there's less chance for any ambiguity and any sort of grey areas. And a good schedule of values or bill of quantities to back it up is great. That sets a really good foundation for a successful project.
Boris, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, exactly that. A good PMO team that sort of has split responsibilities, but at the same time, what it allows is that it's sort of inner checking of the process, right? So it sort of weaves together, and it's great. In the old days, we worked with one designer, a PM, a designer, and a drafter, right? So you had your creative part, then you had your drafter who would keep the creativity in check because there are certain things you cannot build or you cannot do, and then you had a PM there with a budget in a hand and say, hold on, wait, and it's absolutely true that at the end of the day, I joke sometimes and I say, we are Bob the Builder. You tell us what you need and we'll have it design and build for you. But we have our internal customers who are our business owners, right? And those are the one who drive the sort of, or have the needs or what they want to happen, right? So without having this continuous interaction and this sort of approval process ongoing all the internally within the group, you get stuck. You get back and you get stuck and things are missed, and it's very important that it's that continuous process that eventually then ends up in a schedule of value or scope of work and to me, if the project documentation, which is usually your schedule of value, your drawing package and your material package, once you go in a tender, we do the RFIs, which is a request for information that is sent and replied with everybody who participates in tender. I sort of gauge the quality of project documentation based on how many questions we get. If you get flooded next day with the questions, that it means that it's a lot of interpretation, a lot of probably holes and gaps in the project documentation. But if there is silence on the other side, and before you know, you just get quotes back, that's usually a good sign. You cannot. I don't think you can ever make it 100% rock solid. There is no questions. This is what it is. You do that, right? You need to have some flexibility, and it has to be some small amount of interpretation to understand how it is, and maybe the drawings sometimes don't match with this material list, or there may be some stuff that it's not 100% clear. But to me, the continuous interaction of the PMO team, project team, and the business owners, and then through the procurement process where the project documentation is clear once we get tender, once you select, and after that it's all about value engineering, all about making it, reinventing it, everybody with a partner who is selected.
Yeah, I think once you've got the documentation all ready to go, I think the next critical stage is the tender process. That it's pretty. You firstly give the vendors and contractors enough time to quote, because there is a lot of information to work through. And then you have the RFI, or the questions and answers process. You go through a couple of stages of quoting. And then the value engineering process, I think that's a critical part of the process, because inevitably the designers are just looking at it, they just give a design intent, and there's often enough there's many ways that one can deliver that intent, and I think it's sitting with the contractors and working through that. And Mike, maybe you can add in more detail on that, but it's critical to successful budget of the project. Yeah.
I'm going to start this conversation by saying we love designers, David. I need to get that in before I start this.
Good. I'm very glad.
But there's a but. Quite often, again, I go back to time. The more time we've got, then the more influence and the more we can save money if we've got time with alternatives. If it's late, quite often that the specifications of the finishes can be not available, discontinued, not IMO, too expensive. There's a whole array of reasons why we can't get hold of something. So we then need time to be able to come up with alternatives with finishes. And also we can look at things and say, do you know, we can see the effect that you want, but at the moment we're doing it a very expensive way. And we can do this differently with less surgery and less money. And, you know, because at the end of the day, we want the client to walk away and say, yeah, we've had value for money and it looks fantastic. And we want passengers to come on and go, wow, that's what we're all aiming for. And the more we can get involved front end, the more we can help that. You know, the amount of money that's involved, once you're into a project, all we want to do is please. Yes, you know, the obvious result is we've got to make profits, like the ship owners have got to make profits. But at the end of the day, we want to be invited back time and time again. And that's how, you know, you have a sustainable business. And so again, collaboration is, to me, is what it's all about.
Yes.
You know, I think a critical part of all of this is time, you know, making sure that the timelines allow for, firstly, for the team to put out a good set of documentation. There's a lot of work involved in that, giving the contractors and vendors enough time to quote, and then allowing enough time to go through all this value engineering and alternative process and round one, round two, best and final. And it comes down to time. So, you know, I don't know what typical lead times, you know, other brands work to, but we plan almost, you know, 14 months out. And, you know, with the big rebrands that, you know, taking over another ship, and it, you know, it could be, you know, even 18 months that we start, because you do need that time. That's critical. If you don't have the time, it's just going to be a rush. So I think it's important that the timelines are realistic to achieve exactly what we've discussed here.
Well, you come to the catering, the food and beverage side of life. I mean, for anything, it's sort of 12, 14 weeks to have bespoke stainless steel made, whether for in the galley or front of house. So, you know, 12, 14 weeks, and yeah, 12 months is absolutely ideal. Anything less than that, and it starts getting tight.
And that's another. We aim to try and have zero air freight. So, you know, if you're going to be air freighting, you're going to blow your budget. So you want to be sea freighting. You know, for us, that's already, you know, 8 weeks of freight, and then you work backwards from there. So yeah, 14 months, 18 months seems a long time, but that's what you need.
We always say the less time you've got, the more compromise that you've got to make and have, and that's sad really, because the owners have spent a lot of money with designers to get a fantastic area produced, or areas, and the less time we've got, the more it just inevitably changes, which is a shame.
I also think it's you know, everybody, we all sort of carry that cross, right? It all depends how and what kind of direction and how late in the game you get from the executives, right? In our case, we've been fighting from day one for at least 8 months, and then 10 months and 12, and then it depends on the size of the project more. And I can tell you that we end up having 2.5 months or 3 months to prepare quite a significant projects, right? In a way, I think it's important that those things as well happen, because it's sort of, they in a way reinvent the way you do things, and you understand that you can get leaner and faster, and maybe certain times that we were used to in the past, right, when it was only 1 or 2 projects and we had to plan now you realize when you're running 15, 20 projects, you know, a year maybe on maybe 10, 12 ships. I mean, when I make projects, almost the entire ships, you suddenly realize that the things can get done. And there are certain things that I would not like to compromise, and that's the tender, and that's the time to quote, and that's the transparency, and make sure that everybody gets the same chance, because the quality of tender is just one part of the way we evaluate our partners and our partners and the contractors, right? It's not just execution, it's not just support, it's also that. It's also the availability of supply chain and the pricing and everything they can do, right? So sometimes stretching the time sort of flexes the muscle a little, and you understand that certain things can be done in a faster way, but sometimes you just cannot. You cannot squeeze it because eventually something has to give. So when the volume is large, you at least know how to balance and who from the PMO team can take what they can take, right? So
yeah, look, I think you're right. I mean, yeah, if you've given 2 months, you'll do it in 2 months. You know, it's the same thing as, you know, let's go and do a major refit and rebrand in 2 weeks. We do it because we have to. So yeah, I think, is it ideal? No, but yeah, you do it because you just have to. So, but ideally, it would be great to sit and discuss what is the ideal timeline for a major rebrand. And you know, I've as I said, for us, it's 12 to 12 months. You know, when I say you got to be at least 12 months once you start talking about what is it you want to be achieving, because there's quite a lot of detail to work through before you even start putting pen to paper. You know, ship visits after ship visits and brainstorming and branding. So it's not just the documentation, it's the, you know, what is it that the customer wants, or the guest experience team, what is it they want to deliver, and then brief the designers and the project team.
And you know, once you've done it in 12 months, next time is, but you've done it in 12, I'm sure you can do it in 11, and then the next time it's 10, and the next time it's 9, and before you know, you're doing the same thing. No, I can't do it in 6.
I think,
you cannot.
No, but there comes a time where you got to say no. Well, you know,
exactly,
we can't.
Exactly.
Indeed. I think, gents, you've all covered some fantastic insights and some real important, you know, aspects of how that overused phrase of today, that new normal moving forward, about how we are likely to have to address, you know, our approach to refurbishments. I think key takeaways I'm hearing here, and that's definitely going to be necessary, is innovation, the introduction wherever possible of new innovation, of course. And I think what we're all talking about in particular is that key around collaboration. And just in defense of our own design agency, we certainly see the investment within our own internal PMO, so our own project management team, aligning with you know, the brand's PMO teams as well, for that very fact, identifying the entire period that you have, where those key milestones are, and making sure those decisions are made at the right time, you know, by the right people, for the right reasons. And it's always rewarding to see those final outcomes, whether you've been given 12 months, 8 months, or 6 months, or 2 weeks, to quote Mike, perhaps.
Oh, that's a luxury.
I think an area that we haven't touched on is trying to get more bang for your buck now. You know, exactly where will you make the most impact, and it's not just in the visual, it's in the guest experience, it's then, even if it's in technical, where will you get the best bang for your buck, return on investment. I think that's going to be, you know, key as well, the ROI. I think that's critical going forward as well.
Indeed. No, fantastic point, I think, to close on. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your contributions today. I hope that our audience has enjoyed our panel, and stay safe, everybody, and thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Boris, and thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Enjoyed it. Great.
Thanks, Dave. Nick,
Cheers.
enjoy Australia.
Cheers,
Mike, the weather in UK. I'm gonna go and ditch the hurricane in the way now. So thank you again.